Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Catherine Headen. Thank you, Amy, for the very gracious introduction. I am the Director of Diversity and Inclusion for AIGA Boston. That is one of the many hats that I wear. I am also a freelance principal designer, which means that typically I'm the sole design resource hired in to help support companies through their design journeys in a number of capacities. I'll dig into some of the projects that I'm working on later on today when we're talking through examples, but high level, that is what I'm working on. We are really excited to have this panel. I don't know why I'm still standing. We are so happy today to have an opportunity to talk about AI for good. I know that AI has been discussed a lot in the media today, and today in particular. And I'm really, really excited about the possibility for us to dig in more to why we find this field to be so exciting and filled with potential. But before we start and go too far into our conversation, just a quick audience poll. And you can raise your hand multiple times. How many of you are really excited about AI? You can't wait to dig into it more or using it actively? Okay. How many people are like, absolutely not. I want none of this. This needs to stop. Okay. And like, how many of you are on the fence? Like, you're not, oh, look at that. Okay. So hopefully in today's conversation, we will help to bring more positive energy to the field of AI through all the many ways that we've been implementing it so far in our individual practices. So with that being said, I am really excited for my two fellow panelists up here to give an introduction about themselves, what they're working on right now, the companies that they work for, and the teams that they work on. First, let's pass it over to Jill for her introduction.
All right. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Jill Heinze. I work at Willow Tree. So I've been with the company for about 5 years now. For the past year and a half or so, my role has been split into two. So I have always had some relationship with research, in particular user research. So that's what actually brought me to Willow Tree to begin with. So I am a research director. But because of AI, I have kind of split my role. And I've been very fortunate to be able to work directly with some of the engineering teams who are building generative AI proofs of concept for our clients. So I've gotten really a front row seat to see how their process works and how user research intersects with what they do. In particular, I have developed a workshop that we run with our clients as part of every generative AI engagement. It's a trustworthy AI workshop. So we do some anticipatory design work with clients to do AI for good. So that is a bit about me.
Hey everybody, my name is James. I am an interaction designer. I've been at IDEO for 5.5 years. I spent another 8-ish years before that working at a place called Telart in Providence, doing a lot of product prototyping, teaching and learning tools, a lot of physical and digital connection work. So finding ways that people might have novel interactions outside of kind of typical surfaces like phones and computers. But if you're doing something temporary, what might it look like to kind of think further outside of what's currently possible? So it's interesting to be at this point and having done this for long enough. About 10 years ago, we were doing these Museum of the Future exhibitions. We're doing a lot of speculative design, spaces that people would walk through and imagine what the world of like 2050 would be. And we're looking at a lot of this material that we were thinking about in a speculative way is available now and able to be prototyped with, even if it's at a slightly lower fidelity. It's very much real now. So it's interesting to have seen the development of it and to think about where it could be going. So yeah, excited to be here and talk more.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for being here. Just a tiny bit more, again, about me and my past experiences, especially when it comes to the digital workspace. So when I first started doing design work in earnest was really in graduate school, and one of my graduate school cohort mates is over there. I was sincerely interested in how generative art could transform UI. And back then it was like 2008. This was pre-iPhone pretty much. So like the internet was pretty grim. It felt really cold. And I really wanted to know, how can generative art make these experiences feel more whole? I've spent, 2-3 years investigating that. And it's funny because I just picked the project back up now and I'm still working on it because I still feel like the internet could use a little bit of warming up in some of the experiences that we have. And then it's funny just like thinking back, and I know Travis was talking about past lives, thinking through how AI could have transformed experiences for my clients. So I spent a bunch of time in-house working with teams typically related to electronic devices, oddly enough, but really being able to understand like, okay, what is the end of life for an electronic device? Can we model out what that end of life looks like? All the way through to actually like the very, very beginning of that product life cycle when clients were trying to help other clients actually bring those products to market. So, when people have to go out and find a factory to produce something like a smartwatch, there's a lot of different details that have to happen from the factory selection to actually understand how it gets built, that AI could have transformed how that process works. So when we started talking about this conversation, I really started to reflect more on my experiences with past clients and how that AI could have transformed them. And of course, thinking through now, because I'm an independent contractor, how I could use that information to help my clients going forward. So for me, very much, I have to live in the feeling of positivity and positive impact. But of course, we all acknowledge that there's challenges around AI and its current implementation, right? Like in a lot of ways, we're kind of in the infancy of it. So I did just want to mention that before we dive in anymore. Did you guys have any other thoughts about your past experiences and like where AI fits in?
I thought I had an interesting career trajectory until I heard Travis's talk, and then I realized it's probably very boring. But interestingly, I was a librarian, so there is maybe a common thread. Somehow we're drawn to this space. But I mean, we deal a lot in libraries with data and getting access to information. So there's a lot of like corollaries there. And when you're serving people, like directly serving people, you think a lot about equity and like service to others. So I think that thread has really kind of carried through. And of course, I've worked with design my entire career. I've done market research for folks working closely with brands. I have, I sit with designers working on software problems. And so I just really appreciate like the power that you all have in making AI good. And we'll talk a lot more about that. But I think that's also where I'm coming from, is to like empower you to recognize what you can do to really influence this space.
I don't want to add anything to that.
Great. Well, with that, that's a perfect lead into what does AI for good mean to you in your either in your jobs or in your personal lives, or all of the above?
Yeah, I can try to start. I've been finding myself in a lot of situations recently where I'm designing a lot of AI in the workplace tools, and at first it kind of came about naturally where you're conducting research with the folks that you're going to be designing for. They're talking about what the common pain points are in their job, and you realize like, oh, there's tools that can address this, and we can find ways to fold it into your workflow and your everyday and see if we can alleviate some of those pain points. And so in doing that kind of work, I started to see, or started to find like there are patterns that are coming up, and there's ways that you can start kind of working from a place of like really like tight specificity, but see the opportunities for more generalized use. And those things start to feel really good. They feel like they fit into a kind of expectation that we've always had for the tools that we use, the devices that we use. Like they're always a little bit kind of future facing in the way that they're presented to us. And it's exciting to get to a point where you can start actually seeing that happen and building prototypes and feeling the proof of it all. Of course, like I think in the talk that just finished up, there was this conversation about like if you make people more efficient and you can get 8 hours of work done in 4 hours of time, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get paid the same amount of money and you're going to have 4 hours of free time, unfortunately. I would like to see a space where we can start looking at these increased efficiencies as ways for us to create healthier lifestyles for us. That's not most of our decision to make, but I think that's what I hope, is that you can like alleviate some of these really kind of nagging moments in the part of your job, or you can alleviate a lot of these kind of moments that you don't enjoy, make more time for the things that give you value in your work, that help you feel creative and generative and helpful, and then put aside stuff like calendaring and all of the other parts that are a drag and just take up your time.
Yeah, this question keeps me up at night. I love this question. I think we should all just like think about this question all the time. But I would say I'm going to give you a non-answer, which is I do not know what AI for good is. I would also posit that not one individual in this room also knows what AI for good is. Maybe if you pulled the room, you get a little bit closer. If you pulled more people, maybe you get closer. But I think I'll just give you an example of something that I've worked on in the health space. So we worked with a medical education publisher on kind of re-envisioning their product suite. And one of the features that we proposed was AI driven, and it would help medical students review materials for quizzes. They are quizzed constantly. I mean, I don't know. Does anyone know anyone in medical school? It sounds miserable. I would not do it. But I studied them a lot. I talked to them a lot. And so this feature would allow them to kind of pinpoint the areas that they know really well versus those they don't, and kind of like score how they're doing like in a practice scenario. And it sounds like really good. Like we're helping medical students succeed on their exams. They're going to be better doctors and all this stuff. But what happens when you talk to a medical student, they are like, I am so tired of being scored. I am very nervous about these tests. I really don't want, a product telling me, you're not really so good at this, piece. I get that a lot from other places. And there's a huge mental health crisis in medical, among medical students that, it's gotten all the way up to administrations and deans are really concerned about this. So it's a real thing. And I think, here's something, it felt good, but I don't know that actually is good. And that's, I think the point is that we really need to talk to the people impacted by the technology, involve them in the design, and like continually calibrate what that is, because what's good today is not necessarily good tomorrow, and just be very curious and humble about it.
Great. Those are wonderful answers. So I would actually have to posit that although I violently agree with Jill with what you just said about no one really knowing what AI for good means, I am still going to try to be a little bit optimistic and go out on a limb here. For me, as an individual and a practitioner, AI for good is really about building more dynamic experiences, and I'll talk about this more later on as well. I have seen so many fascinating ways that AI has been used to make incredible storytelling and communal storytelling. So literally being able to have either a group of friends or a group of strangers come together in the same room, be able to actively participate in building a story out or play a game together. How many people here are gamers or like in the gaming community? There are some wild things that are coming down the track. It's more than just like, oh my gosh, AI is going to generate a new world map for me. There are entirely immersive experiences that are being designed in the gaming community that's just going to change everything. So right now it's happening in the gaming community. It's going to filter out more into marketing and what we're seeing like more in like one-on-one interactions with our devices. But like those are the times where I'm like, yeah, AI for good. Like we are going to have more compelling stories going on. I'm also, James, you alluded to this in a conversation we had earlier this week. I'm really excited about AI's potential to increase our output and make it easier for me to scale up the work that I do. Like I want to get to the point where I can use AI to help shape that language learning model into the voice that I have and be able to scale up my work, right? As an individual contributor, like that is my lifeline. How many people here are freelancers or contractors? Okay, so that's pretty good. A lot of what we do and the value that we bring to the table is because of us and our voice and how we do things. And if there's a way for us to scale that up, then like, yes, like anything that we can do to help empower that. And that makes me think more about, both of you have alluded to this in your comments so far, but are there any things that you do right now that's more a part of your process that AI fits into? So like something that's like scalable or repeatable, does it fold in at all? And it could be something from like literally I'm sitting down at a computer trying to research something all the way through to like something that you deliver to your end clients.
I'll just briefly say, it does fit. I don't know if it fits into a process. I think someone said creativity hates process. I don't know. That kind of resonated with me. I'm like, but there is a research process, I would say. And I think where we're finding some efficiencies, not just me, but our research practice is analyzing data. We generate a lot of data. A lot of it is qualitative data, lots of words, and LLMs are really good at producing summaries. And of course, the caveats are you have to check that, but we've used GPT within Sheets to create prompts to analyze our data in very intentional ways. So I think that has been one successful application. I use it to get unstuck. I was doing something with actually AI governance. That's something else I'm involved in. And I needed to come up with a statement of principles. And it's just hard staring at a blank page. I was like, there's principles out there. It's not like earth shattering, but I did want it to be particular to our organization. So, you can guide it that way. And it really did help me get started. And then you can really push and finesse and get feedback. And so it has accelerated in that way.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use it all the time now. It's almost strange. I was talking to somebody about this. It's hard for me to imagine going back. Once upon a time when I was doing product prototypes and I'm designing for a space that I'm not from, I'm learning about it as part of this project. For me, the content of your prototype is often more important than like what the physical form or the shape or the UI of this is, especially when you're trying to like crack these difficult user problems or just get people to like galvanize around an approach to something. So having to manually write this content and then having to like connect with people who can verify what I'm writing or help me get it to a place where it's going to communicate in the way that I want is challenging. Nowadays, if I'm starting something from day one, I feel like generative AI has been super helpful in me getting from 0 to 1 in the process. 2 through 10 is still up to me, but being able to get to a point where I can write something that is like on point enough that I can put it in front of someone, they understand what I'm trying to get at, they can help me refine it, they can stress test it. All of that has been super, super valuable and is a way that I don't have any desire to go back to a time when I didn't have that at my disposal. I watch other people, and like this is a thing that I feel like can be true if you have those like expert resources or if you yourself are the expert. Like there's a friend of mine who's an amazing industrial designer, and he uses AI in the super early stages of his process. And because he's experienced and he has the vocabulary, he can prompt the AI in a way that gives him a good amount of control. And it can help him generate quickly. It's a sketching tool for him. And then, he shuts all that off. He transitions into making things in the way that he traditionally has, but it's another thing that he's added to his tool belt that allows him to be creative, to be provoked, to express and design in a way that was impossible before. So I think like that whole thing of like treating it as a provocation tool has been really helpful for me. And then like I also just like to experiment. So there was like a Figma plugin brainstorming tool that was really silly and it broke half the time. But you could like add it to a room full of people that you're brainstorming with, and you could just tell it like only generate dumb ideas or like give me a dumb riff on everything that I put on a Post-it. And it does something. You're not relying on it to get you to the finish line, but you're like adding a layer or a character to your process.
I wanted to see if I could add on that because those are such cool examples. But when you were saying steps 1 and 2, I found there's some examples from steps 9 and 10 that might also be useful for folks in the room. A developer put it to me this way. AI is really good at translation problems. So it could be English to Portuguese, or it could be like English to code. And that is a really big unlock. I have a website I was working on, and I'm not a front-end designer, but this image was like squished. I think I told ChatGPT, this is squished. I can't unsquish it. But I uploaded the code. It was a simple HTML, CSS kind of thing. And after a few prompts, it fixed it for me. And I just pasted it in and I was like done. And it was like magic. So anyway, don't tell, the developers might not think so. I thought it was really cool.
No, that's a really, really great example. And both of you kind of brushed up against this, but like who does the fact checking for AI? Is it you in particular in your processes? Do you rely on other people? Is that like a possible future role for someone to be responsible for AI fact checking?
I think it's good that we're starting to see sourcing showing up in a lot of the tools already. I don't know if any of y'all have used like Arc browser or Arc search. Like that's a nice way to like take the example that came up in the previous talk of I'm looking for something, it's going to crawl the web for me, it's going to locate reputable sources. It's going to consolidate into something that's readable in a single passage, and then it's going to like cite all the sources for me. So that gives you the opportunity to go through and validate for yourself whether or not this place is trustworthy. What is the other contextual information that's sat alongside this stuff? And I think like as you keep using it, eventually, maybe you build up enough trust where you're not doing as much of that fact checking. But it's good to see it embedded in the tools. I think like in my case, what I was mentioning earlier with the prototyping, the luxury that I have is that like if I'm making something, I'm kind of expected to come in without all of the expert knowledge of somebody in that industry. And I'm kind of just throwing things at them and waiting for them to tell me what I got wrong. And that's an important part of the process, is like getting stuff wrong or getting them to sort of call something out, or well, it's actually this way. And those are always interesting unlocks in the conversation and lead to better design. So I know not everybody has that baked into their process, but when you do, it just allows me to ask better questions and come in more prepared.
Yeah, so in terms of fact checking for us, that might mean making sure what we are summarizing is true to reality as we have, obtained that data. And the conclusion that I'm coming to about AI for good in general and that particular problem is that you have to start with an intention. If you kind of just dive, yes, play with AI, but like when you're really using it for like client-facing, deliverable and something really important, think about what it is specifically you want that to do, the tool to do, what you don't want it to do. I'm thinking, for example, there are companies out there who purport to have like artificial people you can interview, and like, okay, if you're doing that to like maybe practice, that's an intention where I could see that being a use case. If you are suggesting those folks could substitute for actual humans and you're going to go to a client and make a recommendation based on that, I think really hard. Like that's not a fact. Like that is an algorithmic like average that you're talking to, and that gives me a lot of pause. So maybe a more direct answer to your question is understanding what the limits of the tool are and what you're putting it to, and then filling in the gaps yourself through your own kind of critical thinking.
Yeah, it's really fascinating that you bring up that topic. So to prepare for this panel, I was just loosely going around and asking a bunch of different people. Some were designers, a lot of them weren't, like, hey, so AI for good, what do you think? And overwhelmingly, people are really excited about it. I was really shocked to see that because I was like, oh, everybody's going to think the sky is falling. But no, people are really excited and engaged in what AI could possibly do. And I was talking to a photographer in particular, and what came to mind was that exact thing of we are still storytellers that control the narrative. The machines aren't doing that yet. We also had like a really interesting conversation on Monday about like what is artificial intelligence, and we can dive into that a little bit if we have some time. But it really is right now like us as individuals being able to understand we are still making these stories. We still have to check facts. There is no like, oh my gosh, this thing is self-generating and creating high quality intent and content on its own independently. And to me, that actually gives me a lot of hope for the future, because it is really talking about that relationship between the human and the machine and being able to make those positive experiences for people. It doesn't mean taking humans out of the equation. It means like we still work in partnership with one another. I'm sure Palantir has a very interesting perspective on that. But for me in particular, it really is like we're directing the show, right? So changing topics a little bit and talking about AI in terms of where it fits inside of your organizations. I've mentioned, for me, because I'm the only designer, a lot of times I'm championing these new processes. A lot of my work, transparently speaking, right now has verged into more design ops and service design, and being able to help teams that are actually getting kind of stuck in the process of building out a design team, or someone's experiencing something that's more along like professional development lines and like trying to build out design teams. So when I come into a situation, I am really the innovator in the room who's like, oh, AI can change your life in this way. Or somebody says to me, hey, I really want to build this model out. So it looks very different for me. But for the two of you, like who's championing AI inside of your organizations? Is this something that you as an individual say like, hey, I really want this tool? Or is there somebody else that says like, oh, I see a vision of this in the future and this is how it could be folded into our work?
Yeah.
Do you want to go?
I can talk. Yeah, sure. When I was in school still, I just generally had an interest in technology and like the place where media and design meet. And as a result, I feel like I've kind of sought out jobs that had like-minded people or had that as a component of their work. So it feels really lucky in a way that like a lot of times the inspiration is just coming to me from other people. Like people will find things that are interesting and they'll put it on everybody's radar as something that we need to be thinking about or considering or designing with in mind, especially when we were like doing these, even just as brainstorm exercises, these like future thinking speculative, like laying out the room of the future or like the bedroom of the future, like small ones, but that get you kind of thinking about what might be possible at a certain time. So it feels like it happens a bit automatically, and there's almost an expectation that we're going to come in as people who know this. I think of myself as an interaction designer who can still be like kind of a Luddite and like definitely has a lot of tensions between like the role of technology and, you know, where we fit in and who's being displaced, and yeah, all of the data concerns that come along with it. I think about it a lot, but I think that's also part of the thing that people expect us to hold. If they come to us and there's a technical challenge at hand or technology is a part of their business, I think that we are expected to both see the opportunities and potentially the trappings of all of the things that we're working with. So yeah, this is a very long-winded way of saying like, I've been fortunate to build up like a professional network of people who are like pushing at these things and interrogating these things, finding the opportunities and the challenges in them.
Great, thank you.
That sounds very familiar at Willow Tree too. I think it's kind of built into our DNA that we play with technology. We are a consultancy. We're expected to be able to help our clients and have, you know, kind of the expertise in advance of it being like in demand. So it was a very early, clear sort of call to experiment. We have our own internal tooling and places where we can safely sort of experiment with generative AI. We have playground areas. So it's been kind of built in. It's in our DNA, and then it's in our systems at this point as well.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic. And again, James, you started talking about this, and then Jill, you built on it. Can you talk a little bit more about where you go to get inspiration for how you're going to fold AI into your either your the work that you're producing or somehow like how your teams are interacting with one another? Are there any resources that you look at that you're like, yeah, this is really great?
There's not a shortage of resources about AI. In my lens, I have been researching a lot of responsible AI. I've really taken that as sort of it's counterintuitive, but I think of it as a creative like spark to say like, I referenced Travis, he was talking about constraints. And I also love constraints. I think that's where a lot of creativity is born. And these are like good constraints. If you anticipate what could go wrong, you can then build things that will, you know, do good. And so a lot of my reading has been in responsible AI, and it comes from, there's any number of podcasts and MOOCs and online courses and academic literature. I'll put some of it online at a later point because there's so much. I've actually had to mind map it out and then make like a Notion, like some brain, like to capture all of that and label it because it's almost too much. It's almost overwhelming.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the thing that I've been trying to do over the years is like as you get turned on to individual people that are doing something interesting in the design space or the design and technology space, you follow them and then you follow the people that they follow and you see who your friends are following and you wind up like building this thing that's always throwing something at you. There was a talk from Nick Foster, if y'all know him. It was like it's like a year old now. But he had an interesting conversation about generative AI tools, primarily in the hands of like visual artists who, as part of their practice, are always kind of like pushing at the edges. So like you listen to a talk like that, you see these artists that he referenced in his talk, and now you've got 5 more people that you're following. So yeah, I feel like over time you can wind up self-curating a set of inspirations for you. But I know we've got someone coming in from It's Nice That to talk. That's one of my favorite places on the internet to be. But yeah, and then also like the other night, just being on a group chat with a bunch of friends that I used to work with, having a little like debate about what can AI do other than just being an assistant? You know, what are the other ways that it can show up besides a prompt? Oh, the other one was like following people around as they move places also has been interesting. Like Google Labs or Project X had a bunch of really interesting work that they were doing. I don't know, like years ago, they were doing this project solely with a lot of these like hand-based interactions that are now just part of everything, like the Vision Pro and all of these like head-mounted interface or like interactive devices. Those folks just started a company called Archetype, I believe, that's looking at taking physical things like, ship pickers at ports and like automation robots, feeding them data from other sensor networks and seeing like how you can kind of like bolster the ability of these existing tools by giving it more data or like leaning on something other than either words or pictures in order to get AI moving. So yeah, like those are things that I just wound up finding out because like I followed those people when they were at Google Labs and they started this other thing.
I feel like you're talking about AI for good. You have an algorithm that really knows you.
Well, yeah, I mean, it gets there. But I mean, to that same like question and the tensions, like we just had the dock strikes here over automation and like there are impacts on people or, when you talk about like the ability to use an AI generated image instead of a stock photo, like there are consequences to that. So I don't know, like on the one hand, you can deal with like price increases that happen when there's like problems at the dock or like, I don't know, I'm getting outside of my depth here, but yeah, I mean, there's consequences to these things, even if like the end result is like greater efficiency and lower prices or whatever it is. Like,
So you've, again, both started kind of hinting at this already. Are there any other industries that you think are using AI particularly well? What I will say as a quick aside, I was floored when Oprah had the AI talk. I didn't watch the entire thing. I don't know if you all are aware of it, but like it was programming that was available through Disney Plus, weirdly enough, and ABC. And I was just like, I cannot believe this. Like I've never seen in just like that kind of format information that was really trying to educate the public about what's happening. We barely do that with voting. So like seeing a very famous popular figure talking about AI and its impact on people and their future I was just floored. So I was just wondering, in addition to the examples that you mentioned already, is there any other industry that you see that's doing this particularly well?
Yeah, I don't know exactly. My instinct is to say healthcare, and I say that because in the infancy of AI, like machine learning, like very kind of like old school AI, they were pretty early adopters. Like pathologists could, analyze medical imagery, and so I feel like while generative AI is new, there's a little bit more of a history there, and there's a lot of historical focus on ethics. So a lot of the stuff that I've learned comes from the medical literature in terms of how they think about things like that, and privacy, HIPAA. That's kind of embedded. So I feel like in terms of like where good can come, personalized medicine and all of the disease states we could potentially cure, it feels like a really good set of use cases in an environment that has a little bit more maturity to adopt it well.
Yeah, I mean, healthcare for sure. One of the things that was interesting to me is like tools that are helping to mitigate these problems of the multitude of systems that are in use in the healthcare space that don't talk to each other, or where you need like a manual intervention to take like the unstructured data from your visit with your doctor and move it into a platform that can get you approval for follow-up care and all of that. Like there are tools that are stepping in to do that. That's great to see. Outside of that, I had another example that's slipping away from me. Oh yeah, like teaching and learning space. So this is another one that is like a bit of a tension for me. But you think about the ability to take like long form text content and convert it into a different format for someone who's more of an auditory learner or like just the constraints of time. Like those things feel like great possibilities. But what happens if you start losing some of the information that gets emitted in these syntheses or these summaries that you're creating? I think there's really nice opportunities to do that and to make things more accessible and flexible for people. But there are trappings there too.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to take a hard turn in the conversation. So something that's come up across the three of us, if we haven't talked about it today, is that we've all either led teams or mentored people. And I did just want to take a quick moment out to just ask, like, how is AI showing up in those kinds of relationships? Are you seeing it? I feel like for me in particular, it's usually coming up in the conversation because people are petrified that designers aren't going to exist anymore. And it's like very interesting to mentor somebody through like, oh, my career might not exist. So it's coming up in that way. And then of course, like on the more client facing side, it's, different organizations are using tools, especially around HR, that are making decisions about who they're going to hire and like really being able to understand, like, do you know what this is doing? So that's what like kind of comes to mind for me when it comes to like, how are these tools being used to actually create teams, manage teams, and then mentor others? Is there anything that you all are experiencing with AI in that context?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind that I haven't experienced firsthand was people telling me about how to game resume scanners, like AI resume scanners. So you're making like tiny white type on your resume that is like including all of these keywords so that the resume, like you'll make it through that initial like resume filtration pass of AI. Those are things that it's like, oh, if you know enough to do that, you're already ahead of the game. But it's also sad that you have to do that. But we're all, we're in a world where like post a job on LinkedIn and it's got 1,200 respondents in, a day or a couple hours. How are you going to stand out if you don't know someone? So, yeah, those kinds of things are interesting. And it's nice if you know enough to like try to work around it. But yeah, I know that we're supposed to be talking about the for good part, but I feel like there's gonna be like more of those hacks that we have to learn as other people are trying to get efficient.
Yeah, I would certainly echo people have this existential angst and they're trying to kind of find their way through, but perhaps researchers more than other disciplines, generally speaking, we're kind of data people. And so there's sort of a little bit of an affinity for that, or at least an eagerness to play, adopt, and, work with data in that way. Yeah, I had a thought that I was prepared to say and then I think I lost it. But other than, I know, we have an effort underway within our research team to evaluate the tooling that we use. So a lot of tools have AI baked into it. And it has forced some introspection just professionally, like, again, like to what extent do we use these things? How do we know data is being protected? Does it comply with our research ethics in terms of like transparency and where they're sourcing their data, that is the vendor. So there's a lot of work that we're doing to make sure the tooling that we're using is really keeping in line with our professional ethos. So
that is a fantastic, hello. Hello. That's a fantastic answer. And it leads quite beautifully into my next set of questions, which is about AI and ethics. So what does ethics mean to you both in the context of AI? Like, how does it appear?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? This is, yeah, I feel like I have also been in a bit of a playground for a while. So like there are things that I think about, like the accessibility of these tools creates an ethics positive in some ways for me. And I think about even like design tools as people started to create browser-based Photoshop competitors that allowed people who didn't have the money to like get a proper Adobe subscription or like didn't know somebody who could hack one together for them. Those things allowed more people to participate in the thing that we do and ultimately find a place in this business. And I hope that there's a component of that for AI as well. Like you talk about game design and things like this. Like I'm hopefully not straying too far, but like when Unreal Engine came out, like the new one, one of the promises was that you could sort of allow artists to create things in interactive 3D spaces more easily because you didn't have to worry about like being constrained by polygon counts and all of this like technical stuff. If you had a vision and you could make things in 3D, you could plunk it in there and you could use it. And I hope that AI tools will do some of the same, allow us to work in media that maybe we don't have the technical skills in, like the example that you gave about like, I don't know how to manipulate this CSS, but this thing can do it for me and like get me there. So that's where I feel like there is an potential ethics positive there in just like access for people. On the other hand, like the things that we've been sorting about data veracity, sourcing, ownership, all of these things I think are complicated and like unanswered. And like, I don't know, we've been having to have a lot of conversations ourselves as an organization about how we navigate some of these waters legally. What does it mean to, like, on the one hand, we might say none of us are going to be interested in creating a final piece of art in AI and delivering it to the client, but like, next year I might feel very differently about that. If I think about people who are generative artists and you create a tool set that allows you to input parameters and get an output that you weren't expecting, is there an argument to be made that you could harness AI in the same way and it's still your thing? And what level of kind of, I don't want to say transparency, but like attribution do you have to give there? You know, like we talked about Photoshop. If I retouch a photo, am I obligated to say it every time if all I'm doing is like adding a little bit of generative fill to like fit this aspect ratio or whatever it is, right? So I don't know. I feel like things have moved so quickly and they've gotten so good that on the one hand, you do want to tread lightly, but on the other hand, it is opening up all of these opportunities. And I feel like having a good relationship with the decision makers in your organization and the lawyers, to be perfectly honest, can hopefully help navigate some of those things. But yeah, I guess the other thing that I would say, sorry if I'm going too long, but like unintended consequences work as a follow-up to anything that we're doing too always is something that you hope you can do. But you know, if you're going to put AI tools out in the world, what does like a post-mortem exercise look like to see, you know, how has it actually shaken out? What happened that you didn't foresee? Is it positive in the ways that you thought it would be?
Yeah, that's a huge. Thank you for going for that. That's a huge question. And that for me, it's like ethics and AI is kind of everything, and it's the reason that I, kind of made this pivot to like a little bit more of a hybrid role because I was so like initially just scared out of my mind about like what this meant when ChatGPT first came out, just very transparently. So my response once I got over that emotional reaction was to lean in, and I'm kind of kicking myself because I've always considered myself a human-centered, person. I do user research and have for many years. We know algorithms are problematic. I mean, that goes back many, many years, weapons of math destruction, I mean, any number of texts. So I regret I was not having more direct ethical conversations. So AI, for the good, has put those to the forefront. And I have done some research. I took a sabbatical where I dug into why is it that ethics don't take hold in teams? Like, what does the literature say about, these blockers and so forth? And part of it is that we do not have a fluency for talking about ethical issues in our design process. And I'll give you one example where I came across such a conundrum and I brought it back to our delivery team. And it's not to say we got to an answer, but we highlighted a problem. So we were exploring the use of accent mitigation in call centers. There's a company that will smooth out accents as like if you as a US consumer are like calling in for a problem. And presumably that'll make the callers be able to understand each other more easily, but it really obfuscates one's, native accent. Is that good or bad? And it depends who you ask and who you talk to. And some call center reps love it, some don't. It's complicated. So I recommend there's a book called Ethical Machines by Reed Blackman. I read that, and what I came to from that is that all of these ethical decisions are so contextual that it almost is it's very difficult to talk about in the abstract, but as you have a design problem, think through those questions. Who could be harmed? Who's like missing from this picture? Who do we need to talk to? And that goes a long way to figuring out at least where your hesitation is and then asking some really good questions about that. And I think that's what, doing ethical design is about in AI.
Yeah. And another quick audience poll. How many of you right now, if you had an ethics concern at your school or at work, know where to go and know who to talk to? Okay. That's like, yeah.
I don't know. It depends.
Exactly. I mean, I think that is something that's like grossly concerning to me. Like, just in general, that problem existed way before this kind of conversation existed. How far we've gone without having sometimes those concrete answers of, hey, if you have an issue or a question, this is your resource to talk to. So it was really helpful to hear, especially that you did that during your sabbatical for fun. Like you were like,
yes,
this is like
God.
the thing. Okay, great. Well, thank you for spending your time doing that. So moving right along, how many people in the room are related to education in some capacity? Either you're a student or you're a teacher. Okay, great. So then let's talk a little bit about how this AI for Good topic fits into the realm of education. So obviously you both have made lifelong learning part of your journeys. You've clearly articulated that today. Sabbaticals and have ethics at the heart of them. Chats that are happening between friends where you're chatting about AI tools. So what are some of the strategies that you've been employing to help prioritize that as part of your journeys? Like how do you help to make sure that you're spending time focusing on getting to know these tools better?
I'll go first for once. If you can't take a sabbatical, which I do recommend, but if you can't do that, I think it is kind of leaning in where you are, where you find yourself. Oop, my potato dropped. That was my sabbatical potato, which I was going to talk about, but save it. In my case, Willow Tree was very open to me doing this exploration in an applied way with our AI engineers and so forth. So that was great. But first I had to get my mind settled about what I know and don't know about AI and ethics, responsible AI, because it is so overwhelming. And that's where I was saying I had to organize and externalize my thinking. And you designers, that's who taught me how to do that. And thank you. Because I had to make like a visual mind map of all of these connection points. So I wasn't constantly like flitting around from thing to thing. And I could say, okay, this branch like resonates with me for some reason. And I'm going to like stick to it enough to like pursue that particular train of thought, and then organize enough about what I was like reading and doing so that I could refer back. And it just made me feel like I had, ownership over this chunk of knowledge that I didn't have before. And I will say, talking to people is also, I went on my sabbatical to an All Tech is Human meetup. I've been a mentor with that organization. And it's amazing how much more dependent I feel on people to help me make sense of these kinds of things because of AI. So another AI for good, I think, example.
Throughout my career, it's always been difficult for I'm into tools and I'm into technology, and I am always trying to find ways to find a thing that I'm interested in and fold it into my work. And sometimes the sort of technical hurdle or the learning curve is too steep to make that realistic. And so you try to squeeze it in your in-between time, on the weekends, or make up a project for yourself. But I think with these, like the Gen AI tools that we are most familiar with, like the language models and image generation, it was so closely related to challenges that I have every day in my work that it started to happen almost, I almost backed into it. I don't do that much generative image making, but I feel like that was the thing that actually got me started tinkering with AI. And there was that kind of initial moment where you're just delighted at what this can do. And this was in like the era of really wonky, just barely recognizable to what you asked it kind of outputs. But there was like something kind of like quirky and fun and interesting about that. Like, hey, I told it to make this thing and look what it gave me. And like by a year later, it was amazing. Like it had gotten so much better, and it started to, I guess through those early explorations when it was super wonky, it gave me enough sort of information and knowledge about how I might leverage the tools in the future that once they got to a certain point, it started to feel like I could bring it into parts of my process. The like language part started honestly with like professional communication stuff that even after all these years, sometimes I'm still insecure about. Like if I'm gonna send this email, how does this sound? How are some other ways that you might word this? Is this too many exclamation points, whatever, But in doing that, it started to get me thinking about how I could get a lot more technical and how I could start asking some of the dumb questions early on, and then start building custom GPTs and like giving it a lot of background information and like harnessing it in a way that made it valuable and useful in my work. But like the learning curve didn't seem that steep. You could make something just by asking for something. It made it easy in that regard.
Okay, perfect. So we are quickly winding down on time. Thank you. So we just have a few minutes for Q&A. If anybody has any questions for the panelists or any thoughts actually on the topic as we've been talking.
So I was thinking about like just towards the end, this idea. So there's like mitigating the learning curve, and I think it comes from when like humans tend to be more honest towards robots in a way. Like if you and this also happens with surveys. I think this is why when you go to your health provider's office, they give you a survey for some questions that you probably wouldn't answer as honestly if you had like told them directly. And so for mitigating the learning curve, I was like realizing like, part of that is, like some of my students like might go to an AI tool to ask for something that they feel maybe uncomfortable or think it's a stupid question, right? Which Hopefully they wouldn't feel that way, but I don't control it. So the question being like, I guess from a more of a research perspective, when you're interrogating like the use of AI tools from an ethical perspective, and do you feel like that same effect happens where you may feel more comfortable going to an AI tool than maybe I can say Google search or a mentor of yours or something as that happens? And what are the ethical implications of that?
I don't know what the ethical implications are, but I'll say I certainly do that for my own learning when I sit in meetings with AI engineers who say words that I'm like, I don't know, can you explain in very simple terms what this means? So I don't know that I have an ethical question about that. And in fact, there is a potential for AI. I work with learning scientists, which is really cool, but there's something called the zone of proximal development. And if an AI can learn to keep you at this place where you are not exactly overwhelmed, but you're continuing to learn just enough that it like suits your kind of learning needs where you're at, I think it has really great potential for good in that respect. So I don't know that I can answer the ethical thing, but I certainly think that's a good use case. Yes, and don't ask me, that's a learning science term. It's basically not too over your head or too simple. That's
it kind of reminds me of like when I'm trying to get my students in like what I call the stretch zone. It's like the same idea where it's like you're uncomfortable enough to like learn something, but not like overwhelmed.
That's exactly what that is.
Now I have a science.
What I will say is explicitly, I keep most language learning models right now and generative content kind of at arm's length. I'm curious about it, interested in it, but like I sit down and write by myself independently before I go to those tools. What I've come to realize as a side note is that some of these experiences feel really nice because they don't have advertising in them. And it's like, is that really the reason why I should be using this? Like that is, and clear, because clearly, and I know everybody in the room is aware of this, like ads are slowly being folded more and more into this generative content. And that in and of itself is frightening because it's no longer an ad that looks like an ad. So when you asked that question, it did make me think like I, as an individual, I tend to be very hesitant to post a lot of things online anyway, but I'm extremely like, to most of the AI tools right now because there's like, you all have mentioned this, it's like 7 fingers. Like we know hands don't have 7 fingers. It'll say things that you're like, why are you using the word innovative 9 times? I asked ChatGPT to write intros for both of you. And I mean, it said things that were true, but it like clearly kept zooming in on very specific words and using them over and over and over again. And I was like, this is garbage. Like I'd rather just have a conversation, put my brain on and think through it. So that's something that came to mind when you asked that question. Any other questions from the audience? Yes.
Yes, a friend of mine, he works in a newspaper and he uses ChatGPT. So he told me he takes a PDF file that has a table in it, like let's say a vertical table. He tells GPT to make it horizontal. And it does in seconds. I'm looking at him like, and I'm telling him that as a designer, for me to do that, that would not be 2 seconds. I would have to redesign and rebuild this table. And he was, of course, talking about like these heavy data tables. So again, it's kind of interesting that a regular person can just take a table and just flip it to a landscape. And for a designer, I'm like, it's going to cost you a lot of money to pay me for it.
And I think somebody made the reference to it earlier. I am really hopeful that AI will help to take some of those tasks out of our hands because like my talent should not be in literally going like this. Or making a red thing blue. Like those are the things that are like, okay, I mean, I guess I could spend a lot of time doing that. But really like the value of all of our brains in this room is around critical thinking and communication and thinking about what's going to happen 10 years from now, right? Being really innovative with where we think the field is going. So I love that example of the table because anybody who has done table design in here knows it is a beast. Like unbelievably difficult to do, and it is ridiculously simple. Excel does it all the time. It's not like crazily inventive UI or anything, but like just such drudgery. And anytime you have to do anything that's like a mock-up and a table, the whole thing is terrible. So I really love that example in question.
I mean, one of the things that has been interesting, like generative design tools, I feel like have not gotten that good. Like if any of y'all saw what happened with Figma in their UI thing that was just ripping off the weather app every time. Like when you talk about this table redesign thing, some of my early days in design were spent doing ad resizes, which are the worst if any of y'all have had to do that. And there's people though that like, that's a part of their career and they enjoy just being in the tools and like zoning out and making that stuff. I hated it, but I don't know. I mean, that's another one of those things where there is a consequence to this. Like there might be somebody who's like, yeah, give me all the resizes. I'll crank it out for you in no time and just listen to podcasts. Yep. But yeah, I mean, I would opt personally if I could to just like throw it to a tool and make this a billboard with all of my elements.
Yep. Right on. Okay, any other questions, thoughts? Yes.
Just on that same theme about jobs and working, can you tell us some of your ideas on how AI can create jobs for people? Because everyone's so worried. I mean, it's a big topic, but.
Yeah, I mean, well, okay. The first thing that I thought of are making tools for designers or like building. And this maybe gets more into like an engineering side, but I think one of the things that isn't there yet are AI tools that are built into or that talk well with the creative tools that we use. So like I could make a cool rendering of a 3D form and I could prompt it well and get that static output, but I can't get a mesh that I can manipulate in Cinema 4D or whatever that then I can have some finer control over. People are going to have to build those kinds of tools, and they'll eventually, kind of downsample those things in order to make it a component of something that's a little bit less technical, but still gives you some outputs and some flexibility and some control. Mm-hmm. So those are things that feel like right there. Yeah. And there will have to be people who design the interfaces for those things so that they make sense to non-technical people. So there's a layer of like creating the next generation of tools that we'll use to get our ideas out that people are going to have to make.
And I'm not sure how well this comment will age, so I'm making a prediction, but I wonder, we've heard a lot of, in the previous talks about the importance of humanity, authenticity, all of these, kinds of themes. And I recognize that our technology is sort of outpacing our human ability to grasp, like come to terms with, figure out how we're going to handle this new paradigm. So I wonder if there won't be maybe less technical positions, but some sort of like translation roles that straddle tech and society in a more concerted way. At least maybe I hope that that's the case, but I feel at some point we need to come to some reconciliation culturally and technologically, and maybe there's roles in making that happen. We'll see. I don't know.
Yeah. The one that I always go back to, and we chatted about it before, is education. We're going to need a whole level of educators that are trained in these tools in many different ways, everything from the development and engineering of them to how we're going to actually fold them into research processes, in our final UIs, in our businesses. That is the number one role that comes to mind. And then, Jill, to what you were saying, I'm not sure what it would be called, but like an AI companion. So I don't know if anybody has anybody in their life right now that struggles with technology. And let's say you have a car that has smart technology in it. A lot of car dealers now have somebody that will help you actually get these systems set up, right? There's a human that helps to do that. Usually they also have some other responsibilities too. But essentially having that person that can help translate and like make it work. I can especially see the case for it in B2B situations, where it's like a consulting of being able to say like, hey, this is how we could possibly leverage this technology for use inside of our business too. I think we might almost be out of time. Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much for being such an attentive audience. We really appreciate it.